actually the only way we're going to get out of this pandemic. Is we're highly anticipating a vaccine and of course treatments along the way. But what has also been more apparent in the last couple of months is that there are also bigger problems as well, such as the food supply chain. How are we going to get materials when we have kind of segregated borders? And of course, there's a huge parallel between human health and our planet, knowing that planetary damage has actually caused a lot of the movement of habitats that then have arisen into more and more animal transmitted diseases. So there are a lot of big problems that we're trying to solve. And in the last couple of months, we have not seen biotech investments slow down. In fact, it has actually increased. So we're extremely excited. So today we are going to, with our panelists, going to be talking about kind of the trends and opportunities around human and planetary health. And then also give some practical advice about what has changed during the pandemic. How do you start a company when things are, seemingly much harder now, and hopefully give some advice to new founders and early stage companies. So first off, I'd like to very briefly introduce our guests. So we have Dr. Jenny Rook, the founder and managing director of Genoa Ventures, who is focused at the bridge of biology and technology, looking a lot at platform technologies as a way to help human health as well as ag and other synthetic biology industries. We have Ella, who is a founding partner of 50 Years, and they are focused on impact and deep tech, looking at biology as well as climate change. And Lori, who is partner at One Ventures, who is focused more on the planetary side and how going from chemicals to systems and looking a lot at how to mitigate climate change. So there's definitely, of all of our panelists, there's a common theme of both human and planetary health. So first off, I would like each panelist to introduce themselves a little bit more about their fund, what investment focuses you have, and what stage is your sweet spot. So let's start with Jenny.
Thanks so much, June. You did such a great job already, so I'll just emphasize a few points. Genoa Ventures is a San Francisco-based venture capital firm. We focus on companies innovating, as June said, at that convergent point where biology and technology come together, particularly early stage companies. So our sweet spot is getting involved early, like seed and A, and helping companies navigate out to market through B and beyond. That is partly because we're all scientists ourselves by training, so we like to really go deep on the science and understand what is distinctive about a company's solution and help the company navigate those really juicy strategic and market questions when there's often so many options in terms of turning a platform into products. Our focus areas, the way that sort of drop out, are things like the tools and technologies that enable the understanding of or the engineering of biology, and then engineered biology itself, specifically outside of healthcare in particular, like ag bio and industrial bio, and increasingly consumer bio, as we see more and more proof points there. We don't do any therapeutics. Consider that a distraction from all of this great opportunity on the frontiers of life sciences as a deep technology.
Thank you. Ella?
Hi everyone, I'm sorry I was late. Thank you for the great introduction, June, and thank you the entire IndieBio team for putting this together. My name is Ella. I'm a founding partner at 50 Years. I think I'm the only, I actually don't have a bio background, so my claim to fame, which is minor, but it's I've started 3 companies, mostly in tech, sort of general software. One failed, one had a decent exit, and one had a very nice exit. Not quite a $1 billion, but $1 billion. But we partner with companies that are solving big problems in the world, and essentially that means we're a generalist fund. So bio and synbio, as applied to big problems in the world, is definitely one of the areas where we've been excited about. We partner with companies at seed or pre-seed stage. We are when we started 5 years ago, we were backing companies with, $50,000 or $100,000 checks. These days, we sometimes, definitely lead pre-seed, sometimes leads seed rounds. We partner with companies at, $600K to $1.4 million initial checks, and then have money for follow-on and sort of to deepen those partnerships. We have been big advocates of, cellular agriculture, anything that can help us remove animals from global supply chains. We will talk to any entrepreneur trying to help us get out of the climate crisis we're in. I think the way we operate right now, we're actually just building the sort of PhD bio team properly. But for the last, and it's been a big learning curve. For me personally, and I think for Seth and my partner Seth, for other people on the team. But I think we definitely are extremely excited about the potential of biology and synthetic biology to, for all sorts of applications in human health, planetary health. Similar to Jenny, I should say we don't back companies kind of commercializing single asset therapeutics. Sometimes when there is a platform approach, we definitely can get behind it, and we believe we need more scalable sort of platform approaches and pipelines to help us, develop novel drugs and vaccines. Same with diagnostics. So we like platform companies. Yeah, and I'm actually laughing because I see that Omri posted in chat that he's volunteering to be the token male investor, and I kind of love that there's 5 women here visible on the chat, and I think that's justice. But we welcome you, Omri.
Awesome, thank you, and Lori.
Yeah, sure. And thanks a lot, June and IndieBio for putting that together. It's going to be fun. So quickly about @ONE Ventures, we are a new San Francisco-based VC firm. We were founded by one of the co-founders of Google X, and we invest in a world where humanity is a net positive to nature. And I think it's a critical topic right now. It's crazy what we are living between COVID. More and more wildfires, temperatures that are increasing, rapidly. In 2020, every single month were either the warmest or the second warmest month ever recorded. So it's really changing very rapidly. And so for us, we are looking at technologies that can, one, really help us reduce the sources of greenhouse gases and pollutions from industries like agriculture and food, and also looking at technologies that can really help restore ecosystems capturing the most carbon, like forests. In terms of stage, we do early stage investments, so seed, Series A, that's our sweet spot. And we can invest anywhere between, I would say, $500,000 to $3 million. And we are seeing lots of opportunities in biotechnology, so really excited to support those companies.
Awesome. So my first question is kind of the elephant in the room, is about COVID, unfortunately, is how has the pandemic changed your investment strategy for 2020? Let's start with Ella.
Ooh, okay. Well, I think the first 2 months, let's say March till May, we were definitely more inward focused, where I think we supported 17 portfolio companies in their sort of bridge rounds, in their top-up rounds. So some of them, just were in the middle of proper equity races. So just, I think, I think in the short term when it all started, we were quite internally focused just to make sure everyone, has plans with regards to the runway. We have, almost 70 portfolio companies right now in the 50 years family. So it definitely has been, especially for a small team like ours, it's just a lot of work, and everybody was just also just focused on personal, and family safety and all that stuff. Since then, we actually have been partnering with, on average, 1 company per month, which has been our, velocity, or whatever you call it, pre-COVID. So it hasn't really, we started partnering with companies from our Fund 3, and right now we have 4 new additions to that to Fund 3. So we've been very happy. Some of these were pre-existing relations. So two actually of the companies we met, we were able to meet in person a little before, and then they told us that they were raising, and so we already kind of had that information and that context. But there were companies and founders that we just met over Zoom, and it did. And I think the way the process changed, and I think this is a new normal for the next few months, and we'll continue improving it, and just for us feeling more comfortable in that new reality, is that we probably have, one or two more calls, and we have done more extensive reference checks. I think just face-to-face is just so high throughput. And we do go on socially distanced walks. We meet in our HQ on the roof deck. So in a way that's safe, and even with masks on, but sometimes founders don't travel, and sometimes maybe they cannot even travel because of international travel restrictions. So I would say we definitely, that kind of, in terms of operationally, that changed a little bit. In terms of our investment focus, again, we just started investing more because it kind of coincided with us starting backing companies with our new larger fund. So I think that should be a positive change for entrepreneurs out there raising money. We actually haven't adjusted our investment thesis all that much. We're still focusing on the world's biggest problems. Some of those problems are kind of shifted a little bit, but I think we're still in the middle of a massive climate mess. I'm almost 6 months pregnant right now, so I'm just in New York, escaping the San Francisco air. But yesterday's eerie orange scenes of San Francisco, I think COVID is one thing, but the climate is really going to and is just going to accelerate all those things. So we're still all in to back those companies, so it hasn't really changed all that much.
Awesome, congrats on the pregnancy. Yeah, and I think one of the shifts that is happening more recently is the idea that this is the new normal, and everyone's trying to figure out how to adjust in this space. And it's great to hear that things are picking back up again. Jenny?
Well, on the question of investing strategy, it hasn't changed at all. So everyone in the Genoa team has been investing and operating in life sciences for decades now. So if anything, COVID has accelerated our opportunity space, has certainly brought more attention to it, as you said, and has given us a shared example to talk about what we're doing and why it's important. As one of our LPs said, well, everybody knows why diagnostics are important now, right? So we can all now talk about why sequencing is important for rapidly getting a hold of what's going on with the viral genome. We can talk about why the immune system is complex and needs to be profiled more effectively for coming up with better treatments. And we can talk, to your point, on the other end of that value chain about the logistics of healthcare delivery and testing and production, for example. So our argument to our investors and to the world is, this is what we've been talking about. This is very important. This gives us an acute example, but this is what was going on already, and we're already part of a decades-long transformation of not just biotech, but other bio-based industries. As Ella said, certainly the sort of day-to-day has to adjust, and so kind of our early, so the first quarter of kind of getting our heads around this, I think very similar for a lot of investors. It's, first take care of your companies, right? Where are they in their fundraising cycles? What does this mean for their hiring? What does it mean for their logistics, for shipping product as they're getting to product launch? What does it mean for companies who are about to launch product at conferences that are no longer happening or happening virtual? So a lot of navigation and adaptation there, which is certainly different in specifics, but not different from, if it wasn't this, it would be some other kind of emergency and challenge, just how we get involved with portfolio companies. And so now, as are kind of 6 months into that and kind of have the house in order and things squared away, it means that the balance can shift back to, I think, the business of looking for new opportunities, working with new companies, and thinking about the future of our firm as well, building team, raising the next fund, things like that.
Awesome. I really like what you mentioned about just, I think the general literacy around biology has increased, and contextualizing what people are doing in that sphere is great for both the investors and the public. Great, Laurie.
Yeah, and short answer from me, because the strategy has not changed at all. We launched the fund right in the middle of the pandemic, so we were already into it when we defined the strategy. Maybe what I can add to what Jenny and Ella said, what we are more taking into consideration now is making sure that the companies are taking COVID into consideration in their cash flow projection, meaning taking into consideration potential delays with experimentation, potential delays with hiring key talents, and also delays with potential customer engagements. But outside that, yeah, nothing has really changed on our side.
Great. So as mentioned already a little bit, that the pandemic has, revealed a lot of new problems, from our healthcare system to our food delivery to climate change. What are the biggest opportunities and the biggest problems that you see that you're excited to fund? So what's on your wish list? Let's start with Laurie this time.
Yeah, so sure. So for us, I mean, climate change, food production, that's already kind of the core of our investment thesis, and it's a key topic for us. I think that with the pandemic, people realized that we can really reduce our impact on the planet. But at the same time, and it's really sad, we are going to end up with almost the same level of carbon emitted as last year. I think the estimations are roughly around 8% reduction of CO2 compared to last year. And this has been with the cost of having, almost all the population on the planet being quarantined and confined for almost a quarter. So this means that staying at home and not taking the car is not the solution to climate change. And so we really see a potential in technologies to help us really produce what we need while giving back to the planet. So for me, we are, really excited, for example, by food production using less lands and no chemicals. We just announced an investment in a company called Ironox, which is a fully robotic system for indoor farming. And basically, you can produce as much food as outdoor farming with 30 times less space and 90% less water consumption. So this is super exciting. We are also looking a lot at the cultured meat space, really as a way to reduce the footprint of animal farming, which is using today half of the global habitable lands. So that's quite a lot. And also looking at stuff a bit outside biotechnology, like new ways to produce electricity or build, for example, homes using alternative to concrete that are responsible for 8% today of the global CO2 emissions. So lots of exciting technologies, and we are seeing more and more companies, I would say in the last year or so, really targeting the climate change issues. So that's an exciting time.
Awesome. Jenny?
Well, one of the areas I'm most excited about has long been a driver for me personally as a scientist who just wants to know more science. So, as I mentioned, we love to invest in the tools and technologies that accelerate our ability to decipher biology, figure out what's going on there, and engineer it. What I think is going to happen with this moment is something that we always look for, frankly, is the kinds of innovations that happen when founders cross over traditional divides. So founders who are intersectional themselves. We have, for example, founders in the portfolio who they were electrical engineers and then they became pathologists, right? Or myself, I was in physics and computer science when I fell in love with genetics. We think that the kinds of insights that come from practitioners who were masters of one discipline and then came to another are truly exciting. And I think that the visibility of the need and the potential that the current pandemic is providing, I believe that will bring and attract even more founders from from other disciplines, whether it's people coming from tech like Ella, people coming from chemical engineering or agriculture who are saying, hey, there's something happening here in the biotech revolution. I want to bring either the deep expertise I have from another area or the customer knowledge I have from another area and really apply that. And so I'm excited to see how what is a long-term theme for us gets fed with additional volume, but also additional insights from those kinds of innovators who are going to change how we do biology itself.
Yeah, indeed. I think a lot of the most interesting companies are ones that kind of emerge out of different disciplines. Great. And Ella?
Yeah, I think we're, because of COVID directly, I would love to see more, vaccine, not necessarily COVID vaccine strategies, but just a better way to bring vaccines to market, be it from the discovery or production manufacturing perspective. These are harder business models, so we fully acknowledge that. When it comes to what we're excited about, I think it depends who on the team you talk to. So when you talk to my partner Seth and Michael, our chief scientist, I know they're all about computational biology and directed evolution of enzymes, and we have supported a few companies in that space, making already generating early revenue while like creating novel ways of bringing valuable enzymes to the market and decarbonizing economy. In the case of Solugen, one of our portfolio companies, it's really a massive impact where like that's just the carbon credit. Carbon credits will be a major revenue source for them as well. When you talk to Xiao from our team, he's all about energy, novel energy storage and construction and anything that has to do with sort of building better buildings and looking at existing real estate and making sure we can use it better. I mean, HVAC is hard, frankly, for a startup. HVAC, it starts for a startup company to kind of come and redefine, because it's so kind of because of just how HVAC is deployed and it's just kind of working with the construction industry is hard. But I think if there was a 10x better, maybe directly solar panel powered HVAC, like we could actually have, again, one of the major, if you look at drawdown, like one of the major emission sources, we could actually solve it. And it's just going to get worse as, as the temperatures are rising. I'm also personally very interested about like the applications of psychedelic medicine and novel future psychedelic drugs to mental illness, treatment resistant depression. So I think that's going to be a big theme for us. Again, there's a few interesting companies in the space, but I think there will be continued innovation there as well. Yeah, I mean, there's I think actual continuous monitoring of human health is something that like sooner or later we will achieve. I think it's quite crazy that we maybe all go to a lab and have our blood drawn, maybe at best twice a year, maybe once a year, and it's just a silly snapshot of where we are today. And many of the metrics say, like when you think of hormone levels, they're circadian rhythm dependent. So like I think you're actually not getting a lot of information from that, and I think really we will only be able to understand human health with continuous monitoring. So like if we can get that, I'd be very excited about that. Yeah, and the list goes on. Anything in we back 8 alternative protein companies already, on the whole spectrum of plant protein and cell ag, and I think it's not an easy space to innovate in because there's just so many other solutions are already kind of being pursued. But we're only, alternative proteins are still such a tiny portion of the market that we still need much better scale up and much better efficiencies and solve some of the supply chain problems there. So I think some problems are they relate more to the like kind of core innovation that needs to happen, and some, you know, it's just this, the good old scale up and building massive businesses with, you know, massive supply chains and big scale operations. So I hope we see that soon. And okay, I want to say one more thing. And better animal models, like anybody working on removing animals, you know, improving existing animal models so that we can use less animals in testing and actually have that be more predictive, and you know, in the future maybe with computational value, remove some of the animal model, like you just, or the need for animal models, that would be, you know, very desirable. And there are some companies kind of already innovating there, but there's much more that needs to be done, and it's not going to happen soon, but we definitely, that's a big opportunity, and I hope people pursue it as well.
I think we temporarily lost June. She's on her way back. Laura, did you get a chance to answer this question about kind of particular things you're excited in right now?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think I already answered. So
okay, great.
maybe we can move to the next question. I guess she had. Oh, she's back. Great.
Welcome, June.
So sorry, I do not know why everything kind of just broke down.
No worries.
One thing for people to fix, please help with technology.
I like to cite these examples when I would say relative newcomers to the space say DNA is just code and let's just program it. Like, okay, yeah, it's technology and that always works, no problem. Yeah, there's never any fail. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So sorry to derail everything. Okay, shall we go on with the next question?
Yeah, I just finished time. Timing is perfect, June. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So looking back, looking more macro, you guys all mentioned that you're full speed ahead with the direction that you've set out to invest in. What do you see as the changing, like, bigger landscape of the investment community? So some people have heard about how people are focusing more on alumni company or their portfolio companies versus making new investments, and especially in a time where people are not meeting people in person, then syndicates and referrals tend to be a little bit more useful. So have you seen that in the greater community? Oh, sorry. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, please, Jenny.
Sure. A factor that goes into, I think, these elements right now, how people are making decisions and in investing and thinking about deployment of capital, at least for the next, call it 18 to 24 months. I think a lot of that is informed by previous downturns, right? This is not the venture industry's first retraction, downturn, whatever you want to call it. So, there's some words of wisdom that we can learn from previous times. And so one is I think, as we've touched on, the panelists have all touched on, is attending to existing portfolio companies, and in particular, thinking about how this affects their burn and capital needs. And so that might show up in, for example, not playing cash balances quite to the hairy edge in terms of achieving milestones and raising the next round. And so being clever about ways to pull in sources of revenue, thinking about non-dilutive funding sources, thinking about expanding existing rounds, thinking about accelerating next round raises, just really making sure that burn rate matches the kind of increased macro risk. And so to your answer about kind of macro environment and how that's affecting thinking, we also have to keep in mind that we're investing other people's capital, and venture is often a very tiny part of other investors' overall investing strategies. And so they're thinking about macro uncertainty, and uncertainty doesn't typically lead to greater risk taking. Sometimes it does, and people are willing to, be contrarian. But in general, I think we may see, depending on how this plays out over the next 12 to 24 months, that there is actually a retraction in risk capital kind of across the board, from our sources of capital, VC sources of capital. And so that's something to keep in mind as well as we think about portfolio construction and stage and strategy and what that looks like in the coming years.
Maybe to add a bit on that, if we look at the last 6 months, I think we've seen a bit of a slowdown, I would say, for two kind of categories of investors. I would say first, the VC firms that were trying to close a fund right now and were not able to raise capital. So basically they are focusing on existing portfolio companies. And also for strategic investors, so corporate venture capital arm of large corporations. For the one where the parent company is suffering from the economic crisis, most of those CVCs are currently focusing on their existing portfolio companies. That said, there are lots of investors that are very active at the moment. Ella was mentioning earlier, lots of new investments. Same for us, we launched the fund in February and we have closed 7 investments since February and about to close 2 additional ones. So we are very active and there are lots of investors out there very active. Maybe one recommendation for the funders in terms of syndication of investors. What we are recommending at the moment is to try to get an investor in your round that is going to place what we call a tracer. So small amount of money now, because it's something that is too early stage for them, but it's something that is going to help them learn about your company and potentially they will be able to lead your next round, because we don't know what's going to happen, as Jenny mentioned. And so having someone already today that be able to participate and take a large piece of your next round is something that can be really beneficial.
I will add that generally, I think, can you hear me? You can? You know, things slow down for, you know, and even in just the other rounds we're seeing in you know, March and May. But I would say since then, the precedent seed rounds, which we kind of have been exposed to, and some of, and Series A's in the portfolio, again, we're an early stage firm, so I think we have less data on like the Series B's and Series C's. They have been quite competitive. And like, I was actually, you know, they generally paused, you know, outside of the internal investors until May, but you know, June until now, we've seen really good pre-seed and seed rounds happening. So I think for founders raising now, if you have a strong founding team, if you have a good idea, if you have a good founder market fit, if you know what you're doing. I mean, I think it takes guts to start a company when there's a little bit more uncertainty. It's just this weird period when we just kind of don't know what the macroeconomic effects will be, because, you know, for a while markets have, you know, the public markets have not been really reflecting you know, the slowdown in consumption and so on. But I think the pre-seed seed rounds we've seen, and you know, the Y Combinator demo day just happened recently with, you know, I don't know if there was maybe 200 companies, and the valuations were, I would say, unaffected by COVID, which was actually in some cases quite shocking. So, you know, if for anyone, you know, needing some signal there, I would say that's the data point that shows that there is, you know, there's been a bunch of funds raised in the past years, and I think there's still a bunch of money to be deployed. So again, we don't know what the next year will bring. So I think, you know, everybody, you know, maybe some firms are a little bit more careful. We know of one, I won't name them, but we know of one kind of major Series B, C firm in the Valley with great reputation that kind of like paused all their investments for a few months. But yeah, I wouldn't, if you are an entrepreneur out there thinking of starting a company or, you know, raising your seed or pre-seed, you should be fine. I think, you know, given that your idea and the team and everything else is fine, it might take you a little longer. You might need to have more conversations, but like, I wouldn't be too scared. Like it's your responsibility then to like use that money well, because it's unclear how long it will need to last for, but you know, make it last for a while. Yeah, and other than that, you know, I personally say, like, I'm actually quite surprised that some of the rounds out there are and have been so competitive, but I'm happy for the founders. I mean, the founder in me is always happy for the founders. Like, you know, it's never easy to run a company, and it's never easy to run a company in a downturn. So I think, you know, the optimism is not fully, has not let, you know, it's still there. And obviously in some areas such as, you know, the future of work, and, you know, we definitely seen some big winners also. I mean, and then, you know, there's been, I think somebody mentioned it in some other IndieBio panel with Alex that I attended, that there at that time, and maybe that number is higher right now, but there's been 48 biotech IPOs since COVID started. So I haven't fact checked that number, but if that number is correct, that's a pretty high number, even like for just the enthusiasm that's out there. And you know, and Jenny mentioned earlier, like just the literacy around some of the problems we're talking about has definitely increased among your kind of non-bio investor.
Awesome, and that's actually a perfect segue, as you were talking about founding teams, into kind of the remaining time. I would like to give our audience some practical advice around early stage startups or prospective or aspiring founders about what they should be thinking about during this time. So as you mentioned already, that, you know, while we're talking about deep tech and biotech companies, people mostly think about the technology and the idea is the most important thing, but I think everyone on this panel agreed the founding team is probably the most important thing. So what do you look for in a founder? Maybe we'll start with Lori.
Yeah, and definitely agree with that statement, especially because with early stage companies, yeah, maybe you have done a proof of concept at a lab scale, maybe you have a couple of customer engagements, but there are still lots of uncertainties around the technology and the market. But something that is less likely to change are really the founders. So we really focus on that point. And for us, so what are we looking for? I will say first point is really the domain expertise of the founding team, either in terms of technical expertise or market expertise. And because this is something that's going to help them also attract top talents. When you have a degree in a specific sector, you have people from the school potentially that you know, and they know other people. So it's going to help you attract talents and potentially industry experts. And it's something that is quite critical, especially for the CEO, to be able to build a strong team, especially at an early stage. So domain expertise, ability to attract top talent. Third point, I will say coachability is something important to us, really the ability to listen and receive feedback, especially during those times that are kind of crazy. Being able to listen to feedback from your advisors, from other team members, from your investors is something really important for us. I will say also a diverse team, or at least an openness to diversity, because we really think that diverse teams are stronger and they build better products. So it's something really important for us. And maybe last point I can mention is related to the solo founders. So it's not a deal killer for us, but we like to invest in founding teams where there are at least 2 founders, because creating a company, it's really stressful. Lots of challenges. You are going to take a lot on your shoulders. And so it's good to have someone where you can share really this burden, and someone that can potentially challenge you. So again, it's not a deal killer for us, but there are some VCs that are explicitly saying that they don't invest in solo founders. So I will say, if you are thinking about creating a company or just starting building the company now, maybe it's a good time to think about bringing potentially another co-founder on board.
Excellent points. And I like the diversity in founders, just like Jenny was talking about the diversity in topic areas too. So Jenny, would you like to add some thoughts?
Sure, thank you. Laurie, I think those are all excellent. So maybe I'll just synthesize a little bit or abstract away, which I think what we're looking for in founders is fundamentally, we're trying to ask ourselves, will they deliver? on the vision, on the plan, on the potential. And so many of those factors that Lori laid out sort of roll up into that attempt to tell the future about that, assess that. So I think if you're just practically speaking, if you are a founder and you're saying, well, I don't have one of those things, or I feel like I've got a gap someplace, it's helpful to, I think, be honest with yourself about where those gaps are, because everyone has gaps. And then think about how to either fill them directly or how to indirectly, both for your own benefit and in pitching to investors, to say, here's how we will access other resources to address those. So if I don't have the deep expertise in some, say, technical element of my company that I'm founding, and I don't have that co-founder, because that's such an important decision, maybe you want to hold off on that until you find exactly the right person, you can at least go get someone on the advisory board who brings that deep expertise, who can help you make great decisions, who can help with that network and top talent benefit that Laurie was describing, and who can provide credibility. So I think being both honest and then creative about how you, in a scrappy way in those early days, fill in the gaps around the question of what is it going to take for this team to succeed over the long run. It's a very hard and very long journey. I think building a startup is like the hardest thing that humans can voluntarily do, basically, maybe other than raising kids. So it's gonna be so hard, right? And so making sure you're gonna have the staying power to get to that vision that you're so excited about, finding ways to fill in those early stage gaps until you have more momentum, more resources over time.
I have heard the analogy of raising kids as a startup, and the other way around too. Like your startup is your baby as well. Cool. Ella, you mentioned the words founder company fit or founder technology fit. What does that mean to you?
So, we want to see, and again, I'll also just echo so many great points here, so I don't think I should repeat them, but so technical excellence vis-a-vis the problem. I think there's many founders out there, and I really respect that, like, who are essentially, maybe second-time founders who want to contribute to, let's say, the climate crisis, or want to, remove animals from global supply chain, or, help commercialize a novel cancer treatment. But obviously, for some of those areas, you need deep expertise. So sometimes what that means, it means bringing on co-founders who have that technical expertise, and then as a team, then you have that founder problem fit. So it's not just kind of aspirational. It's also, especially for the types of companies, it seems like all of us are backing. It's extremely important that, like, you can attract the world's best people to join your company, and generally those people tend to be attracted to technical excellence and just being able to work at the best company in the world doing X. I think Google is a great example here. Early on they just hired the best mathematicians and search search folks, I believe, from Stanford, and they just created this incredible talent pool. And then in some of those companies we're talking about, like, we'll need to create those big talent monopolies as well. We want to see novel, in addition to that, we want to see novel perspective and just kind of seeing a problem from a new perspective. And we want to see, not in everyone, and I think that's a rare mix, but like, among at least one of the founders, a good business instinct, when they kind of understand, maybe this is a silly comparison, but like the sort of the Tesla master plan. Yes, we want to, make, electric cars the new standard, and think of, putting fossil fuels in cars, a relic of the past. But like, to do that, you need, many years and many steps, and there's many kind of if X, then Y. And at the same time, for those years, you have to kind of not run out of money, and maybe not just rely on outside financing. So I think whenever we meet founders who have technical expertise, but then have a very have very smart ideas about like how they can start generating money early, and not just necessarily in the service model, but you know, productize something to make some money to then essentially you know go to their next milestone. That's extremely important, and that sort of business instinct, I mean, it's frankly one of the most important things. We love crazy optimists, but who also know what would kill them. So we ask a series of questions to kind of understand if founders have blind spots. And you know, people skills and charisma, it's always important in hiring. I mean, hiring the best people it's a sales job as is fundraising. So you know, you need some of those skills. Some of that you can learn, but I guess coachability around those areas is an important marker of like how, for us, we think it's an important predictor of how a founder will do. So yeah, that's kind of what we look at and look for.
And you mentioned the business instinct. So how do you show business traction when oftentimes people don't even have the technology made, or if it's a therapeutics that's going to be, you know, far away? Well, I guess in this case we don't have to talk about therapeutics, but like if it's a technology that still needs years to be made, how do you want to see, or what would you want to see in business traction? A lot of people talk about LOIs, but is like, what are you looking for in the LOIs from the quality and the partnership side? So maybe Ella?
Yeah, I think it really depends, right? Like for certain problems, you know, if it's a therapeutic for a disease that, you know, currently has no cure, I think the market is pretty clear. The question is if you can, you know, if you can deliver it, right? And if it will, and if it can be commercialized. So I think here, the ability, you know, to start some early pharma partnerships, which can be a distracting model, but it doesn't have to be, you know, is a predictor of like, okay, they because, you know, the risk is always that the company will run out of money before they get to where they need to get, right? So can they find those other sources of revenue? Like, have they been in the past extremely scrappy in how they use academic resources or how they use grants? Or like some people just, you can see that they have this way of, you know, creating something out of nothing, and they're just extremely resourceful. And I think that sort of resourcefulness and is you know is what we would look at in a company that, like, you know, needs, you know, tens of not millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to get to market. If in terms of companies where, you know, they're not maybe doing a single asset therapeutic, and we don't really, you know, we don't really partner with companies currently doing single asset therapeutics. It is a little bit more clear because, like, they generally often have something and they just need to paint a picture of, you know, this is the customer development we did, like, this is how we understand, you know, the unit economics versus the scale, and this is who the early customers would be. And just very often interacting with them, you see if they understand the buyer, and if they understand the problem, and if they understand the sales process. And sometimes this is enough, right? So it's you know, given that we back companies at pre-seed and seed, like sometimes there isn't that much traction. I think sometimes LOIs are actually great, and in some cases they might not mean that much. So I think it's case specific on, like, you know, what is in that LOI, and like and you know, and how did that LOI came together, which is, you know, a predictor for us. I always think it's you know, obviously founders have to do whatever it takes to raise their next, not whatever it takes, but like whatever it ethically takes to raise their next round of financing. But, you know, I always am a little cautious when I see that founders are wasting their time and doing things that are just being done for the purpose of fundraising. And I always prefer, you know, like, because your time is all you have. So like, you better not be doing things just, you know, just to impress investors. Like, at the end of the day, you have a company to run, and you will have it to run even when you raise, you know, your pre-seed or seed. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
That's a great point, that LOIs don't necessarily mean anything, especially if it detracts from your core story and how your business is going. Lori?
Yeah, and I really agree with what you just said, Ella. So I'm not going to repeat everything, but yeah, LOI, we've made investments with companies I didn't have any LOI. I'd say what we are really looking for is making sure that the founders really understand deeply the needs of their customers and that they have spent, I don't know, lots of hours with their customers, really understanding what are the pain points and validating kind of the solutions that they are putting together. So I will say for us, the bare minimum is kind of a validation of the market. So please go out, talk to potential customers. Even if the feedback are negative, it's always good feedback to take. And I think for us, this is a good validation rather than just having LOIs that sometimes means nothing. I'm not going to be convinced by a slide with maybe 5 LOI on it. I will be more convinced if you tell me what are the needs, the specific needs of your customers.
Great, and Jenny.
I'll say that I think a lot of the art of being an early stage investor is, and I'll use Ella's word, is finding good predictors at these early stages of future commercial traction, right? Because that is the risk that we're all taking together when we decide as investors and founders to get involved and try to get there. So as with teams, again, what are we synthesizing for? We're trying to predict for future commercial success. And so what are the pieces that go into that? I really think Laurie's point about clarity around the customer need is critical. And so that's one filter for, is it a good or not so good LOI? Does the LOI say what the customer is going to use it for, why they're interested, what's their pain point? So that's important. But another piece is how the company will get paid for the solution. There are a lot of pain points out there that don't necessarily come with functioning markets, right? And don't necessarily come with revenues from the user, right? So there's often a disconnect between the person who is, or the organization who's feeling the pain and would like your solution, but actually has the budget or intent to pay for it. So indicators around willingness to pay that support the pricing model and the revenue model in the long term, also important to be quantitative there. Those can be harder to come by, and that's where the creativity of the founders, but also the investors can come into play. So as a seed investor, part of my job is to partner with the founder and say, what can we get done with this relatively small amount of seed resources? What's going to make the most difference when you go to raise your next round in terms of showing progress toward that eventual commercial traction? Maybe that's a set of LOIs. Maybe it's one great customer relationship who's going to try the prototype and be just a fanatic reference source for those next round investors. So to Ella's point, it does depend. And so you have to think about the so what, which is being able to predict that future traction and then be creative about how to get to it with seed or other early stage resources that are available.
Can I just add one more thing? Because I actually think very early, and great comments, Jenny and Laurie. I think one thing that is not, an LOI and it's not a contract, and we're talking about like very early companies, again, pre-seed or early seed. I think in some of those conversations, we want to see, and frankly, we need to see the founders like really that they really understand the alternative technologies, the substitutes, and like what everybody else is doing. And obviously you shouldn't obsess on that. Like that shouldn't be for the sake of, just, being kind of obsessed with competition, but like you have to know if there is a technology that's, or if there is a way to get to X that's alternative to what you're doing that like can essentially kill you, or like kill your company. So if we know something, or if we know about a company, or if we know about an approach, or we know about an academic lab that's doing research that's, maybe not directly competitive, but at least, could be one day, or is solving for the same problem, and then the team doesn't know about it, that's a red flag for us, because they should have done their research. I think like the business intuition about like what is the market, what will happen, and we're trying to predict the future again, like 5 to 10 years. Like this is part of, hopefully an exciting initial research that all teams, all founding teams should do. And again, I think it's an exciting thing to look at, especially if you're starting a company in this space. So you better be prepared to answer some questions about that.
Awesome, thank you. I have one last question that we'll try to do really fast to bring us to the top of the hour, and I obviously appreciate all of your time that you spent with us here today. Really quick is, give us kind of an idea of like from when and how you first meet a company to, you know, the meetings that you take with them, then to term sheet, then to final due diligence and final documents signed. Can you give us a little quick overview of what is kind of normal for you, and especially highlight maybe the parts that have changed during COVID, since most meetings are now virtual? So let's start with Jenny.
Right, so we each get like 45 seconds to outline our investment process. Okay, here we go. I'll tell you how it's supposed to work, and recognizing that it often doesn't work this way because of delays. So sorry, we're humans as well and distracted by a million things. So, but the way it should work is, first conversation to get to know the story overall. This is sort of the the elevator pitch and maybe some background information, just to make sure it's a good use of both parties' time to continue the process. And there may be a follow-up question call there to address questions that go into that as well. Like, does this make sense for all of us to dig in? Is there a fit in stage and scope and expertise? And then if the answer is yes, then what we're going to do, at least at our shop, we do, painfully detailed diligence to try to build an investment case. We're addressing all of the components of potential and risk as we build. So you can think about it as like building a dossier of evidence for why we should make the investment. Most opportunities don't get very far, frankly, in that process. They get triaged out somewhere along the way due to some risk or area of incompleteness or market opportunity, whatever it is. And so that can take, it never for us takes weeks. We are a more traditional biotech investor in the sense of high conviction, high concentration. We're going to make 2 or 3 investments a year. We're going to have really significant involvement. So most drop out. So it's going to take months for us to get to yes. And then I think it looks sort of like a conventional closing process. So that's probably the specific area to us.
Cool, Lori?
Yeah, really quickly, I think for us, the process has not really changed with the pandemic. We've done last week our first investment in a company where we never met in person, the founders. So it feels a bit weird, but basically the whole process from first email, it was a cold contact from the company, to the investment itself took roughly a month and a half. We were not leading the round on this one. I would say if we are leading the round, it can take anywhere between 2 to 3 months process in total. Very similar to what Jenny mentioned, so I'm not going to repeat those things. We are doing our due diligence. We are doing lots of interviews. We want to meet all the team members if it's an early stage company. We want to have interviews with previous investors, with potential customers that the founders have. Maybe one recommendation. So what's hard with the pandemic is really to build the relationship with the team. It's much easier when you are in person because you don't just talk about the company, you can talk about other stuff, and that's really the way to build a relationship. So I will highly recommend use Zoom, put your camera on. If you can, organize virtual visits of the lab for us to really see the technology and to see the stage of development of the technology. And also just show us the people around and people that are working on the technology. It's important for us to understand what is the dynamic within the team. So use Zoom, it's a good tool, or Google Meet or whatever, Skype, whatever, but it's yeah, that can really help us make the call.
And Ella. Oh, I think you're muted.
About that, the fastest we backed the company was maybe after a few days where we kind of had high conviction on the space. We were actually waiting for the right team, so we already had to build thesis around a problem, and we didn't have to do any digging on the technology. We just had to talk to the team and check what maybe that was pre-COVID, like when we didn't do reference calls. I think now it's probably a matter of, you know, a few weeks. If we see that there's good progress and, you know, there's a few conversations these days over Zoom, maybe there's a possibility for a socially distanced hike or not, and we might need to do additional reference calls. But yeah, it's really pretty fast. There's been situations when that process took a few months, and again, I mean, I think what Jenny said resonates, that we're only human. We are just now, you know, we have a chief of staff joining us, we're building out our organization, but like, you know, we do get overwhelmed as a small organization with throughput. So sometimes, unfortunately, things take a little longer than we wish. But, you know, sometimes when we think the team is great and the problem is great, but we want to see more traction, we just communicate that, and then we check in a few months and like, or keep in touch, or like try to be helpful. And then, you know, as one of the companies we backed with our Fund 3 recently, it was kind of that scenario where we kind of met them 4 or 5 months prior to partnering, but there's been this constant communication, and it was pretty clear what we want to see. And it just kind of happened. So yeah, it's kind of case by case, but, you know, best case scenario is a matter of, you know, a week or two, usually 3 to 4 weeks, can be longer.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there's so many more things I want to chat with you about, but we're at time. I highly respect your time, and thank you so much for joining us. Real fast for our audience members, at IndieBio, we have a string of events coming up. They'll be posted at indiebio.co/events. I'll type that into the chat. If you want to get a hold of any of the panelists today, please feel free to email me with a forwardable email, and I will forward that on. So thank you all, our panelists today, and all the audience for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jen. Bye-bye.
Thank you.